what all that is?
Huh?
You know why all the evidence for this? Is it all that? I don't think so. I think it's like college
Oh, is there a
students.
presentation? A presentation?
Oh, that'd be why.
Prompt response. I said that's a prompt response. As soon as you got up, it came on.
Good evening. Today is Tuesday, October 15th, 2024, and the time is 6 p.m. The regular meeting of the following will come to order. The Victorville City Council, the same council sitting as the Victorville Library Board of Trustees, the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the redevelopment agency, the city as a housing asset successor, Joint Powers Finance Authority, and the Victorville Water District. Madam Clerk, will you kindly call the roll?
Councilmember Gomez.
Present.
Councilmember Irving.
Here.
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman.
Here.
Mayor Becerra.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. If you would please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. The invocation tonight will be led by Pastor Jairo Gaviria from Calvary Chapel, Victorville, and our pledge will be led by Captain Randy German.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As I read here in Romans 13:1, it says, "Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God." Let's pray. Father God, thank you for the opportunity to pray here in front of Victorville City Council. Because your word is truth, thank you for placing each board member here this evening. We thank you for giving them a servant's heart to serve this city and its many residents. Lord, we ask for your guidance and presence to fill this room so that decisions can be made morally, justly, and unselfishly. Lord, I pray that knowing you are in complete control of all things in this meeting, that whatever happens here tonight, you will be glorified. We ask all these things in Jesus' name, knowing that you will meet us here to answer these prayers according to your word and your timing. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight we have a special presentation of new hires and promotions. Mr. Metzler, will you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Yes, I will. And we'll certainly have Ms. Heather Barber, your Assistant Human Resources Director, lead us at the podium. But on a quarterly basis, we like to take the opportunity before this council to recognize new hires and promotions within the organization, give them an opportunity to visit you here in your chambers, but also to recognize and celebrate the milestones that we're achieving in our workplace. So with that, I think it'd be appropriate at this time to turn it over to Ms. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I'm here this evening to recognize our new hires and promotions for the months of July, August, and September. First, I would like to recognize the newest members of our city team. They will each be called to stand in front of the dais, presented with a pin, and then I would like to invite you all down to take a photo with the newest members of our team. So we're going to start with new hires. Denise Salazar, Deputy City Clerk in the City Manager's Office. Mallory Piles, Customer Service Representative with Finance. Mariel Nunez, Customer Service Rep with Finance. Maribel Cruz Perez, Customer Service Rep with Finance. Claisha McElwee, Finance Technician with Finance. Star Kavanian, Assistant Director of Finance. Carol Vernon, Accountant with Finance. And Adelia Lamas, Customer Service Rep with Finance. Anna Flores, Senior Account Clerk with Finance. Isaac Cinco, Maintenance Worker with Community Services. Kyle Addock, Airport Maintenance Worker with the airport. Masood Zarifi, GIS Coordinator with Information Technology. Jennifer Chavez, Secretary with Community Services. And you guys have already met him, but Jeremy Kosick, Deputy Fire Marshal with Building. And that is all of our new hires for July, August, and September. So we invite you guys down for a photo. Oh, want them up there? Okay. Thank you. Now we're going to introduce our promotions for July, August, and September. Same thing, I'm going to call everybody down here to stand in front of the dais. Molly Smith, promoted to Secretary with Engineering. Aaron Gemmel, promoted to Maintenance Lead Worker with Public Works. Marianne Zamora, promoted to Administrative Secretary with Human Resources. Jose Zamora, promoted to water distribution lead worker with Public Works Water. Angel Mota, promoted to equipment operator with engineering. Stephanie Dornbos, promoted to management specialist with the city manager's office. Isaac Morales, promoted to maintenance worker with Public Works. And Amanda Bionis, promoted to management specialist with city manager's office. And those are all of our promotions for July, August, and September.
Mr. Metzler, kudos to you and HR. I understand how hard is it getting that many hires, new hires and promotions done in a quick time. So thank you very much to you and your staff.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, will you present the agenda and any revisions there too?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are no revisions to the agenda this evening.
At this time, are there any conflict of interest on the council? None? Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Victorville City Council. Your City Council is interested in your ideas and opinions and furthermore endeavors to incorporate them into its deliberations. At the same time, the council must be able to carry out its business in an organized and efficient manner, free from material disruption. Therefore, this meeting will be administered in accordance with the council's established policies and procedures in Government Code Section 54957.9 and 54957.95. Individuals may speak on agenda items or on issues not posted on the agenda during the public comment section, provided those issues are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. Individual speakers may address the council once per public comment period and once per each public hearing item for up to 3 minutes. Additional time may be allotted for appeal hearings in accordance with the city's adopted policy and procedure manual. Those who desire to comment on a public hearing item may wish to reserve their remarks until that particular public hearing has been opened. All testimony is to be directed solely to the council. Although open meeting laws do not permit council members to engage in dialogue with any speaker during the public comment periods, please know your comments and questions may be taken into consideration by council members when discussing a particular agenda item. The presiding officer may briefly respond or have staff respond to statements or questions, or may request that the staff report back to the council at a subsequent meeting. Speakers are requested to comment as briefly as the subject permits. Once comments are invited, the speaker will be called on by name, then recognized by the presiding officer. The speaker will state the item number that will be addressed or that the subject is a non-agendized matter. Audience members may not disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of this meeting, and those who do are subject to removal from the meeting pursuant to Penal Code 403. Your understanding and cooperation are appreciated. Our first speaker is Joseph Izquierdo on agenda item number 9.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the High Desert Association of Realtors as president of that organization. With regards to agenda number 9, which is the Community Facilities District, we're requesting a delay on that proposal so that we may discuss some of the issues outlined with the BIA in their letter, and also to request the High Desert Association of Realtors be part of a working group with regards to that matter. As our request, if we can have a delay so that we may have some input on.
Our next speaker is Anna Gramis on agenda item number 9.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Anna Gromis. I'm here before you on behalf of the Building Industry Association of Southern California, specifically the San Bernardino County chapter. I know my colleague Carlos Rodriguez sent you all a letter today. I hope you've had a chance to review that. I'm here to reiterate the position of that letter, which is to respectfully request a 30-day pause on considering any action regarding agenda item 9. We urge your support for additional dialogue to address concerns regarding the city's proposed new tax burden on Victorville residents. During the 30-day pause, we request a formation of a working group to convene a series of meetings to further review this proposal. We believe that absent this collaborative dialogue, the current staff report is insufficient and does not provide the City Council with any meaningful input from key stakeholders, such as the BIA, such as the realtors. While we support the city's goals of enhancing public safety, it is also equally important to ensure the accuracy of the calculations to avoid adding any unjust tax burdens on residents. Specifically, the current study includes several flaws that deserve additional discussion. The city is also calculating the property tax revenues using a below-market home price assumption, I apologize, this is kind of far away from me, of approximately $366,000, when in fact this number should be closer to $407,000. In short, we do not agree with the methodologies used to calculate the city's proposed increase. We urge the City Council to provide additional time for the working group of industry experts to further elaborate and consider a market-driven alternative based on current and historical data. It is abundantly clear that current housing approaches and policies have not resulted in significant new housing production, and supply remains significantly out of sync with demand. Moreover, the housing crisis impacts every aspect of life in California, and it is discriminatorily holding back California's economy. With your support, the working group can provide invaluable insight that ensure the proposed tax does not exacerbate the state's housing crisis. In conclusion, we respectfully ask for a 30-day delay on considering any action item related to agenda item 9. Our goal is to collaborate with you all to ensure we address the significant housing needs and to strengthen the local economy while increasing opportunities for families to prosper now and in the future. We look forward to working together. We hope you take our request into consideration.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, there are no additional speaker cards for this section of the agenda. However, we did receive 2 letters for item number 9 that were emailed to the council and members of the public and posted to the website, and they are from the representatives of the organizations that spoke earlier.
Thank you, ma'am. Our first business of order, public hearing. Our first business of order is item 1, introduction of proposed ordinance number 2452, amending chapters 2.04, 2.08, and 2.22 of the Victorville Municipal Code to further define the powers and duties of the city manager, formally authorizes the use of insurance in lieu of statutory faithful performance bonds for the offices of city manager, city clerk, and city treasurer, and update the city's municipal code provisions relating to the city's personnel merit system. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. For many years now, this administration has recognized many conflicts that exist within a variety of our governance documents. which include city council policies, administrative policies, personnel rules and regulations, along with our very own municipal code. This administration has chosen to use this special period of time while we're in transition at the executive level to actually take great focus on each of those governance documents and update those documents and bring them more current before the end of the year and bring them more current with either current practice or current law. And I think most importantly, to make sure that there's the avoidance of conflict between those same documents. This item tonight before you particularly focuses on the conflicts in our municipal code and relating to our governance structure as a council manager form of government, which in basic terms is to mean the city council is responsible for setting the policy, the goals, and giving direction to a hired professional city manager that is hired effectively to be responsible for the administration of the entire organization, including all matters affecting personnel. And so this also it takes into consideration code conflicts that are believed to exist between the municipal code and even the employment contract that you've set forth with the city manager. So with that, this is one of the first of many attempts to start cleaning up our codes, our rules and regulations, bringing them current so that we avoid problems with them conflicting down the road. You have a pretty voluminous staff report before you that's been prepared by your Deputy City Manager, Ms. Sophie Smith, who I'd actually like to turn it over to actually walk through the particular code focuses that this item is speaking to so that it's clear and it helps facilitate a much better conversation to the extent the council has any further questions or comments regarding the item. So with that, Ms. Smith.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor and council members. As the city manager mentioned, I would like to give a brief presentation before the public hearing, just to walk through the changes because some of the changes are more significant than others, and we would like to give a little background and be able to field any questions on those particular changes. As Keith mentioned, the rules and regulations that govern the employees are fairly dated. The last major update appears to have taken place in 1994. So as a part of working on that project, we started looking at the municipal code and how it relates to the personnel rules and regs. And that took us to chapter 2.22 of the municipal code. When we look at a municipal code for updating a section, we typically look at the entire chapter so we can try to bring it up to date. That chapter, as well as certain provisions in chapter 2.04 and 2.08, were mainly adopted in the 70s. So we took a more thorough look at the entire chapters and are proposing all of our changes at once. So I would like to quickly walk through the changes in 2.04, which is the chapter that deals with the city manager's role. 2.08, which deals with other officers, such as the city clerk and city treasurer. And then I'd like to spend a little bit more time on 2.22, which deals with the personnel system, which is a merit-based system for the city. So starting with 2.04, as mentioned in the staff report, we have updated a section involving a requirement for the city manager to have a surety bond. This language is pretty old and we cannot find any record of the city manager or in the past or currently, as well as the city clerk and treasurer have the same requirement. We can't find any record of these bonds being in place. For what appears to be over 20 years, there is an insurance policy that the city has. It's an faithful performance of duty coverage for government employee endorsement under our government crime policy that provides coverage for faithful performance of duties of not only the city manager, the city treasurer, the city clerk, but all employees and officials. So what we're trying to do with the changes in that section 2.04 2.040, as well as later sections dealing with the clerk and treasurer, 2.08, 050, and 060, is to bring that up to date with current practice. So that's the main impetus behind the changes in that section. Also in 2.04, there is a section that deals what happens in the absence of the city manager, where he typically appoints an acting city manager. And at the time that language was adopted, the structure of the city included an assistant city manager. Because that position doesn't currently exist in our table of organization, we've updated that section to allow the city manager to designate a competent staff member. That would normally be a department head or deputy city manager. 2.04090, that is where the current code already indicates that the city manager has authority over the employees, but it specifically has a phrase in it that indicates that he will give direction through their department heads. Again, that was adopted in 1968. Not all direction necessarily that the city manager gives in the normal course of duties is going to go through the department heads. At times, the department heads may not be available. There can be directives given to all city employees, for example, during COVID. And so it doesn't always go through the department head. So we are removing that section or that phrase from that section. Also in 2.04, there's 100, there is the power of appointment and removal that is already currently given to the city manager, and that deals with his authority to appoint and remove employees. Everyone except for, there's an exception there for the city attorney, and it does specifically call out that the city manager can appoint the city clerk and city treasurer. The reason that's important is that at one point in the beginning of the city, those were positions that were appointed by the council. So at one point, I believe it was 71, that delegation of authority was given to the city manager. But they did have a clause in there that indicated that those two positions, the city clerk and the city treasurer, shall not be subject to the personnel ordinances, rules, and regulations. So we wanted to go ahead and remove that phrase so that the positions actually are subject to the personnel rules and regulations. Few other minor changes in that chapter involved where the city manager is responsible for bringing the budget to council. We also added in what our current practice is. He also brings, or the city manager also brings, the updated tables of classification and compensation for employees as part of the annual budget process. So we just wanted to make sure that that was included in there. The current language refers to a salary plan, but that's not really the method that we use. And finally, in that section, we have updated 2.04280, which is the limitation on removal. And that's a section that was last updated, I think, over 30 years ago. And it talks about the city manager, the council not being able to terminate the city manager 90 days after an election. And that had to do with, the practice that basically all cities have of not trying to politicize the termination of a city manager in conjunction with an election cycle. The language is pretty unclear, so the city attorney's office helped us to clean up that language. And also we updated the time periods that reflect the time periods that are in the current city manager's employment contract. And that contract, the limitation on removal is 90 days before an election and 180 days after an election. So that covers all of the changes in chapter 2.04 that deals with the city manager. 2.08 is the chapter that deals with the other officers. I've already mentioned that there were bonding requirements of the city clerk and city treasurer. Bonds were to be in place, surety bonds in the amount of $5,000. As I mentioned, the city carries a fairly large, that has a $5 million limit insurance policy for faithful performance of duties by city employees. So this would allow us to substitute that insurance policy. There's another update in that section, 2.0830 and 2.08035. And that has to do with some government code sections that specifically designate a city clerk to file certain annual reports and provide updates to the council as far as financial reports. My read is that in the 60s and 70s, the clerks often had those types of financial duties. So, 50 years later, that the practice is more so that the city treasurer or even a director of finance is responsible for those reports. So we are bringing that language, up to date many decades later. Finally, there was a section in the existing code that deals with removal of papers or documents from city offices. And previously, the individuals authorized to allow that were the mayor, city attorney, and clerk. We have updated that section to reference the city manager and city clerk, as those positions are here on a daily basis and would be more likely to deal with the day-to-day take home of work documents, et cetera, by city staff. Okay, so now let me cover 2.22. Those are the more significant changes. So, as I mentioned, this all started with a look at the project of the rules and regulations update. When we looked at the municipal code and the process that's defined in municipal code to update the rules and regs, we looked to the section that was adopted in 1971, not, less than a decade after the city was incorporated. And that calls for a process where the rules and regulation revisions are to be publicly posted for at least 5 days. And then any amendments or revisions to those rules and regulations may be suggested by any interested party, and then the council would vote on those changes. So as we started to look at that process and the fact that many of our rules and regs are 40, sometimes 50 years old, it would seem that the non-administrative nature of that process is not one that is helping the city to keep up with most current law and updating the rules and regs. So the question was posed to legal counsel, and I should mention that in this case, because we're dealing with personnel law, we not only consult with the city attorney's office, but we also have personnel attorneys, a separate legal firm. And with the city attorney's permission, we consulted with both. And we asked the question, if the council could delegate, along with the powers that already exist and already have been delegated to the city manager over employees, if a city manager could have the authority to implement and revise the rules and regulations. Very specifically, we were referred to Government Code Section 45004 by both legal firms. And that is the section that allows the council to designate a personnel officer. And the Victorville City Council designated the city manager of personnel officer back in 1971. But the additional language from Government Code indicates that they may delegate such powers and duties in relation to managing the personnel system as it deems advisable. So the answer was yes. That we received from both firms. And so we proceeded with the revisions to Chapter 2.22 of the Municipal Code. That is where the personnel system, the merit system of the city was adopted back in, when the city was incorporated and has been revised ever since. So very specifically, Section 2.22040 of the Municipal Code currently calls for that system and that process that I indicated, the public process where any member of the public, employees, et cetera, can come to the council meeting and request amendments or revision to the personnel rules and regs. That system does not seem to go hand in hand with the council manager form of government. So we have revised that section to allow the city manager to implement the personnel system and including revising the rules and regulations for the employees. We've also updated that section so that the city manager has a responsibility to revise the classification and compensation plans. And those are the documents where your changes to the table of compensation and table of classification come from when you see those each year during the budget process. Finally, we have added a section to that, a phrase to that section that indicates the city manager would keep the city council informed of changes affecting major personnel policy, the city workforce, or personnel impacts on the community. So what we were trying to do in that section is eliminate the potential for conflict if issues involving the personnel rules and regulations are handled back, the way that it was established in 1971, where employees could come to you rather than the city manager to deal with personnel rules and regulations. Additional changes in that chapter are some cleanup language in the exclusions from the competitive service. If you're not familiar with that, there are certain higher level positions in the city that are deemed to be excluded from the competitive service. And in our organization, that's department heads and above. And what that means is that they serve in an at-will status. So they can be hired directly by the city manager as well as terminated by the city manager. They're at will. They are not like the other city employees. So that list has been updated to more appropriately reflect our current table of organization. Further changes are, there are on page 10 of your agenda, there are several sections that are being deleted. That's the personnel rules, the appointment to competitive service, et cetera. Once the authority and the responsibility to update the rules and regulations of the employees is given to the city manager, the need for all of those subsequent paragraphs no longer exists, because those are currently covered in rules and regs, and they're being further updated in the revision to the rules and regs that we're working on. And finally, there's the elimination of language that gives the city manager and the council the authority to contract for personnel services. That's already, the council and manager already have that authority in another section of the municipal code. So overall, the staff working on the rules and regs project as well as this believe that these changes in the municipal code, eliminate any potential for conflict between the city manager's role and the city council. They go hand in hand with the powers, duties, and authority that already exist with the city manager from existing municipal code 2.04, 070, and 090. They also exist from the employment agreement with the city manager that indicates he has authority over the employees and the power of appointment and removal. So with that, we are recommending approval of the ordinance, and we remain available for any questions.
Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That your honorable city council open and conduct the public hearing and receive public testimony, close the public hearing, introduce ordinance number 2452 for adoption and first reading by title only, and waive further reading in full of proposed ordinance number 2452.
Thank you. At this time, we'll do technical questions from council members regarding this item. Councilmember Jones?
How did I know you were going to call on me first? All right. So it makes me feel very comfortable that this has been, has had many sets of eyes on this. I think that's good not only for the council, future councils, but certainly our community. Silly question, if I may, Mr. Metzler or Sophie. Are all ordinances subject to CEQA? And if not, why is this one?
Andre, I think that's a question better asked for Andre. I don't know that it's all ordinances, but
Yeah, typically it's not all. It's if there's any impact potentially on the environment, this is done more precautionary than anything else, is just to do a finding that we don't, further additional CEQA compliance.
Okay, and I think that's all I have. I mean, I think it's very clear that a lot of work was put into this. And again, it helps me to know that we've had, a couple sets of attorneys plus our own city attorney looking at this as well as the talent of staff. So I'm good. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Irving?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think you alluded to the fact that these revisions are under the guidance of employment attorneys.
Correct. Both the city attorney's office and our separate personnel attorneys.
But with regard to the revisions, they are they're made under the guidance of an employment attorney, correct?
Correct.
Okay, because initially, and I want to say thank you for the conversation that we had. Initially, I was concerned with redefining or further defining and clarifying the city manager's role, that the council is somewhat acquiescing their authority to the city manager and giving him way more power over personnel issues. Because I shared with you, I was concerned about I was concerned about employee protection. So I want to say thank you for that in-depth conversation. Lastly, I wanted to know, what's the time frame for completion? I know it's ongoing, but it sounds like we still have work to do.
Yes, because it is a closeout project that I have been given the ability to work on before retirement. The goal is to have it done by the end of the year.
And so how far along are we? Like 75% or?
We're about 70% done.
Very good. My last question is, you said that we had not looked at these rules and regs for over like several decades. In some instances, it could be like a little bit of a lifetime. Are there any other areas in our municipal code that are so outdated and archaic? And if they are you familiar with what sections?
I see the city attorney shaking his head. I see the city manager shaking his head. I think we,
Do we have a lot of work to do? Because it sounds like we're not in front of the ball, we're behind.
I think I'll defer to Mr. Metzler.
Okay, thank you.
So certainly our code by nature has some age attached to it, and that's not necessarily to say it's a bad thing, because certainly some of the codes that we have on the books, that we've had on the books for many, many years, are still practical and applicable today. Certainly what we've tackled, which is in front of you today, is something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis as it relates to the administration, and quite honestly with the connection of the municipal code and say the personnel rules and regulations. Quite honestly, I think because the connection exists in requiring approval process by the council is probably what's contributed as an example as to why it's been neglected and perhaps not attended to. It very well could be attended to, but it very well could be just not knowing the history, that we just couldn't get the support up here at the dais to approve those things. And so it's a very monumental task. I certainly can speak to the ones that we're most familiar with that affect us on a daily basis, are what we've tackled first. And what I can tell you is that, presuming that this item goes forward, it gives us a good place to start from, to actually start a recurring review on a semi-annual basis, to where perhaps every couple years I've got a committee put together to be able to review and keep that review continuous, so that there's a constant assessment as to, hey, are these codes still current? Are they still good? Did law change? And be able to update them that way. With this probably being the most pressing, to answer your question, once we get done with this, we'll have an ability to start looking at some of the other codes to figure out, are they good or do they need to be updated?
Okay, Mr. Metzler, this is my last question. Why has it been since, 1971?
Well, I will.
You're pretty progressive guys. Why is it taking so long?
And I appreciate that comment. I really do. I will be straight up with you. This is probably one of the least fun roles or areas of responsibility we have. It's not a function that has traditionally been staffed with a dedicated focus. There's always so many different pressing issues, and from my perspective, given what I like to do, there's so many more interesting things to do than to dive deep into a document like this. But I will also say this, it really takes a unique individual with a unique set of skills, not only to be able to dive into these documents, they're legal documents, and be able to compare them all side by side, make sense of them all, and be able to find the conflicts between them all. And quite honestly, the special type of person to be able to do that also needs to have institutional knowledge. And so it's been, quite honestly, not something that's been the highest priority, given the complex nature of work, the specialized nature of work. It's something that we have known is necessary, and of course, given the special opportunity that Ms. Smith has provided us in having, given us the announcement with well enough time to plan for her retirement, it's a perfect opportunity for us to obviously transition the way we did. And of course, we thank the council for its support in putting this transition plan together, but allows us to have an individual that has those talents, has that institutional knowledge to help us kind of shape this thing before she moves on to her retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Irving. Councilmember Gomez?
What is the rationale for the temp or the seasonal, whether it's part-time or full-time, and the employees and part-time employees being excluded from competitive service?
By the nature of those positions, they don't have what are referred to as property rights of employees.
Is there a way to fix that to give them rights and due process in their established roles?
From a due process standpoint, typically for termination, for example, of a part-time, seasonal, temporary employee, it is within law for them to not have the due process or appeal rights for termination, for example. That's the difference between that type of classification and a full-time employee. But as far as general rights that are otherwise, authorized in law, rights against anti-discrimination, things of that nature, all employees would have those. This is specifically to their termination.
And why not add the city clerk and the city attorney to be part of the competitive services or to adhere to the personnel policies?
Well, there's two different things there. You said the city attorney and the city clerk?
Yeah.
So the city clerk is being exempted from the competitive service. So as I mentioned before, that's a high-level position similar to a department head. So they are at will. They serve at the pleasure of the appointing authority. In this case, that authority is the city manager that was delegated by the council dating back to 1971. The reason the city attorney is excluded from the competitive service is he serves at the will of the appointing authority. In his case, it's the city council. So he serves at the will of the city council.
And will the removal of papers and documents not adhere to state laws of the 2-year archival process? Is my understanding, is that what we're doing?
So I think you might be referring more to document retention.
It's removal of papers or documents from city offices that I'm referring to.
Right, so that section is dealing with physically removing, maybe taking home work product, for example. The 2 years that you're referring to sounded like it was retention, so retention remains unchanged.
And for investigations and complaints, how will due process rights and external third parties be involved? I didn't see it as part of it.
Those would be items all covered under the personnel rules and regulations.
And for this, the city council is currently under an insurance or a bond, and how does that section cover bonding requirements?
Effectively, as Ms. Smith said earlier, the bonding provisions effectively are archaic and not practical. And in fact, for many years, we've been using an alternative form of security, which is effectively an insurance product that actually extends beyond that of those previously defined positions of the manager, the treasurer, and the clerk, but also does extend to council members.
And what is the transfer of the city clerk? So we talked about transferring like powers and duties that the clerk had to the treasurer back. Is that something that was just refined?
Well, refined in the sense that we're bringing the code current, but for many years, and as far back as I can remember, which I've been here 27, 28 years, we've always had a separate finance department responsible for not only the controller responsibilities, but also the treasury responsibilities, separate and distinct from the city clerk's office. And so there must have been a time, certainly preceding me, where perhaps when the city was a much smaller organization than it is now, you had the city clerk perhaps wearing multiple hats, including some financial responsibilities. That's what we take from this code, because this code bestows financial responsibilities to the city clerk, but we're not structured in a way today where the city clerk has responsibilities over anything that the finance department currently has. So effectively, we've realigned those responsibilities to be more consistent with how we practice today. And treasury is a function that's actually housed in the finance department. And so therefore, those types of finance-related functions are better described in the treasury role.
And what are the safeguards that are available for the at-will employees in terms of competitive service?
All of that would be described in the personnel rules and regulations, including all rights to due process.
Is that a part of the report?
That would be part of the personnel rules and regulations that were apparently.
Sorry, it was a part of the agenda. I didn't see it.
It's a part of the personnel rules and regulations that we just shared with you that is approximately 70% done. If the council approves this item tonight as drafted, it gives the authority for the manager basically to approve that final product, but this code also requires that it report back changes to the personnel rules. And so effectively, the update that we're doing currently to the personnel rules and regs, my expectation will be that once we're done approving that document, we will share it with this council
Okay, so it's not attached, right? Is that what you meant to say?
because it's not complete.
Thank you. And there's a section that I wanted to know what defined the major personnel policies, and can you change or to and so that the city council gets all the personnel policies, any city work or personnel impacts as pieces of information from your office?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what section you're referring to.
Finally, this section has been updated to require the city manager to keep the city council informed of changes affecting major personnel policies, the city workforce, or personnel impacts on the city community. So I wanted to know what defined major personnel policies, and there was an or, so I was asking to have it replaced with and.
I think the language speaks for itself, but just similar to what I just responded with, and especially as it relates to the direct language that you're speaking to, any personnel, any changes affecting major personnel policy, finalizing this updated personnel rules and regs, I would consider a major change in policy. And that's why I'm expecting that once it's done, we will be sharing that directly with the council.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I've had all my questions already answered prior to the meeting. Sophie, good job. Your skill set is high. Thank you. That's all I have.
Madam Mayor, I have a couple follow-on questions, if I might.
Sure.
Thank you. So, Mr. Metzler, knowing that we're a little bit beyond 2/3 complete, the remaining work, will it still have the oversight or the input of the personnel attorneys? Thank you.
Yes.
And then with regard to the retention of records, nothing would prevent the city from using its discretion to retain records for longer than the set timeframe?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Metzler, I only have one question. On page 31 on the digital copy in front of us, it's all the 2.22 section. We're not dropping the probationary period. We're just taking all this out because it takes it out of our hands now and into your hands, correct? So the employees are still going to be on probation. Well, not that type of probation, but
The
employment
the
probation.
concept of probation is something that is certainly going to survive and be a part of the personnel rules and regulations. I think the biggest reason for removing it from here and actually putting it under the direct authority and responsibility of the city manager is just to avoid not only conflict, but, you know, the potential for undermining and potentially even interfering with the manager's ability to perform the duties that you're tasking that individual to take on. So this is effectively being eliminated because we're going to be dealing with it separately and singularly in its own document.
Okay, so the employees still have the opportunity for disciplinary action. That if they feel unfair, they still have the opportunity to see the city manager, because as you said, he holds direction over all of this, correct?
There will be a very defined deliberative process for everything from complaint to disciplinary action and due process if there's disciplinary action required.
And I would like to add that there is language in the ordinance that indicates, because we don't want to have this period of nothing being in place, that the existing rules and regulations, the handbook that the employees currently have, is in effect until the time that the new rules are adopted. So there is no limbo period, so to speak.
Thank you very much. Very well done, thank you. I'll open up the public hearing at this time. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak?
I have no speaker cards, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Now close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, will you read the title of the ordinance?
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Victorville, California, amending chapters 2.04, 2.08, and 2.22 of the Victorville Municipal Code to 1, further define the powers and duties of the city manager, 2, formally authorize the use of insurance in lieu of statutory faithful performance bonds for the offices of city manager, city clerk, and city treasurer, and 3, update the city's municipal code provisions relating to the city's personnel merit system.
Thank you. At this time, I'll invite a motion for this item.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adopt staff's recommendations as to points 3 and 4 as presented on the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a first by Councilmember Jones, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Harriman. Councilmember Jones, any comments?
I have none, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I have none.
Thank you. Councilmember Irving?
I'm glad that we're beginning to update outdated sections of the municipal code. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gomez?
I believe the questions that I posed are memorable to show some of the instances that we have had issues, so hopefully that stays on the record. That's my response.
I have none. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez? Councilmember Irving?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
Yes.
Mayor Becerra?
Yes.
Motion passes with Councilmember Gomez voting no.
We've now taken action to approve points 3 and 4 of staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. We'll move on to the consent calendar, items 2 through 8.
Madam Mayor, I move that that the council and the council acting on its various boards of directors take action in accordance with the recommendations set forth on the agenda, items 2 through 8.
The second.
First by Councilmember Jones, second by Mayor Pro Tem Harriman. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez?
Aye.
Councilmember Irving? Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
Yes.
Mayor Becerra?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We've now taken action on items 2 through 8 in accordance with the recommendations as set forth on the agenda. Written communications, item 9, resolution of intention to establish a community facilities district number 2024-01 to provide city services. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This item's been brought forward as a result of the council having first adopted many years ago, back in 2020, a strategic plan, where in that strategic plan, we've adopted a number of goals for this council and for this city. And within each of those respective goals, there are a number of strategies actually that help work towards us achieving those goals. As it relates to this particular item, the goal of this council has been to begin focusing on fiscal sustainability for this organization, not only in the near term, but certainly over the long term. And that's largely in response to what the council has recognized as effectively an imbalance in the comparison between revenues generated and the costs associated with the services it provides. I mean, we've realized, and it's not unique to us and it's not new to us as a city, but all cities experience cases where the cost of the public services rise at a much greater pace than the revenues generated. And so that's what fueled the council's motivation back in 2020 to incorporate that strategic plan initiative. And then this council also in 2023, as we approved our second strategic plan, we also again adopted a similar goal involving fiscal sustainability. But in this particular strategic plan, we even got more specific to actually speaking to certain mechanisms. And among those mechanisms, it identified exploring the creation of a CFD, effectively a community facilities district or a financing tool, basically to help mitigate the long-term costs to this city that is not paid for by new residents, new development coming to the city of Victorville. We've commonly seen over the years, and we've pointed to housing developments throughout the city, where, say, for example, we've got 30 and 40-year-old communities where we have insufficient revenues basically to maintain the roadway system, the local roadway system with our neighborhoods, because those neighborhoods are competing for the same pot of money in road maintenance money that would go to the major arterials such as Bear Valley Road or Village Drive or some of the bigger roads. So we've always had that challenge. And so the CFD is something that we've been exploring for some time to serve as a money mechanism to be able to collect for the amount of money that it costs to provide services that are not being paid by the new development. And so with that, we started earlier this year. Actually, we started late last year, but we first brought back to this council, I believe it was back in May, with a presentation to this council on this CFD concept, how it would work. Of course, there's a black box that helps establish all of the inputs and assesses all of the assumptions to determine what is an appropriate methodology and calculation to determine the applied cost to new development. But we effectively presented that to the council with the ultimate intent of bringing it back as we are tonight to have the council give further consideration. Further motivating this item is that we do have a property owner request basically to initiate this CFD process so that the property can be annexed into a CFD so that that property ultimately can vest its tentative tract map, but then also investing the tentative tract map also upon development have a mechanism in place to be able to mitigate its long-term economic impacts to this city. So with that, generally that's the nature of this item. We do have a presentation by our consultant, Ms. Heidi Sheppy from Webb Associates. She was here back in May to give us our last presentation. I'd like to invite Ms. Sheppy up to provide that brief presentation to give overview again for this program, how it works, and then we'll certainly remain available for any questions or comments you might have.
This is quite forward. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. I'm here this evening, the presentation, oh, there it is. Here this evening to present to you the item before you, the first step of 3 in the creation of the CFD 2024-1 municipal services for the city of Victorville. Again, Heidi Sheppy, Webb Municipal Finance, and I have with me Matt Chesney and Brent Howard available to answer questions. So we're going to go over overview of the CFD, the initial project, that is the formation project for the CFD, go over next steps, and then be available for questions. So CFD 2024-1 municipal services is a CFD to provide for offset for services being provided by the city to new development in the areas of public safety and maintenance services including street maintenance, park maintenance, landscaping, lighting, signage, flood and storm protection, graffiti abatement, and public safety services related to police, fire, and code enforcement. Special tax A, which is one of the special taxes of the CFD, will be providing for the public safety. We are taxing developed property only. The rates are calculated based on land use categories. We are proposing an escalator of 5% or CPI, whichever is greater, with an initial rate starting at $525.35 per single-family residential home. The maintenance special tax B is a tax that will be assessed on developed, approved, and undeveloped property if necessary to meet the requirements of the city to provide maintenance. Each new tax zone will pay for its own maintenance items that'll be calculated as each development annexes into the CFD. And again, the escalator is matching that of the public safety with an increase of CPI or 5% to maintain the ability to pay for those services with inflation and increase in costs. A little bit more detail on special tax A and the calculation for that. The proposed increase in public safety services being calculated was for new development only. So the CFD and every property annexed into the CFD would be paying for a level of public safety that's calculated to provide for new development and is not an offset or supplement to provide public safety at an increased level for existing development. So your new property owners are basically just paying for services that they're requiring of the city and not supplementing services being provided to other properties in the city. The allocation, so the total full burden for public safety services was calculated to be $1,830.29. That's based upon a lot of data and information from the city on expenses related to police, fire, and code compliance. And that number has been agreed upon by the BIA and their developer consultant. We are proposing allocation of revenue that would be provided by the new property to offset some of that cost. So the burden isn't fully on the new properties, that they are bringing in revenue to offset that cost to the city with a offset of approximately 72%, bringing the rate to $525.35 per single-family residential unit. You could see over here the residential and non-residential. The non-residential rate is about 0.04 so 4 cents per building square foot. The first project, so the formation project, is tentative track map 14525. Is located west of Stoddard Wells Road and southeast of the I-15. It is planned to have 312 residential units on approximately 117 gross acres. The maintenance special tax will pay for street maintenance, landscaping, and graffiti, and the initial special tax rate for maintenance will be $165.47 per residential unit, and that would be unique to this project as Zone 1 of the CFD. And then this slide reflects the calculation of that special tax B, so it gives you a budget to show the specific items that were included in the calculation with a contingency in the event that something is either more expensive or the quantity upon development is shifted from what is projected from the track map right now. And then again, it pays for landscaping and graffiti abatement. Tricky one. So next steps. So this evening, we're presenting to you with the recommendation of staff to approve the resolution of intention, which approves your rate and method of apportionment, annexation area, and boundary maps. Your next step would be a second council meeting, which would be the actual public hearing, protest, election, reading of the ballots, and then a first reading of an ordinance to authorize the levy of the special tax, followed by a second reading of the ordinance in December. And then in the future, new projects that are developed in the city, so they have a map, new single-family residential subdivisions would then annex into the CFD to pay for services that they are requiring of the CFD, of the city. And with that, we are here to answer any questions.
So with that, Madam Mayor, in a nutshell, I think what this CFD is doing, and it actually helps kick things off for us because, you know, the recognition we've had as staff, and certainly at council is that new development, does not pay, its fair share for the costs of service, whether it's public safety, which, in this particular case would be defined as your police, fire, and code enforcement. But also, there's a component in the CFD that proposes collection for O&M. So that would be maintenance of your roads, maintenance of your LMADs, your public facilities. And so one of the calculations, and you saw the $1,830 number up there for the public safety component. And what that item is showing and what we've worked quite extensively with the BIA through this process and included them, and with the agreement that with no disagreement as to the 1,830 for the public safety. One of the things that we are trying to do with this CFD is have a collection mechanism to be able to pay for that cost of that new development that comes in the future, absent an ability to collect a revenue source from that new development over time to pay for the recurring cost of service. Effectively, we are required to dip into our current pockets and effectively subsidize future growth. And that's what we're trying to change the course of with this CFD. And so with that, you'll hear the 1830, but then you also hear derivatives of that. You'll also hear questions about, you know, appropriate calculations and appropriate methodologies as to how to capture, you know, a certain share of that from the CFD versus alternative sources. I think for all intensive purpose, what we're trying to at least bring forward to you, and with tonight's item is just a resolution of intent. It's not any different than any other LMAD that we're used to bringing before you, where we actually express the resolution of intent. You effectively don't formalize it until you do the public hearing and actually open the protest ballot from the property owners that are affected in terms of the area. So tonight's action to delay certainly would just further delay the ability to have that public hearing. But actually starting the resolution of intent at least allows for the intent of the project to move forward, with final action resting later in November. So with that, certainly I suspect there's a lot of questions regarding the item. We're prepared to answer them. So we'll yield it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
Staff recommends that the Honorable City Council accept the petitions from the property owners requesting initiation of formation of Community Facilities District Number 2024-01 of the City of Victorville Municipal Services CFD 2024-01 to finance certain ongoing municipal services, and adopt Resolution Number 24-092 authorizing the intention to establish CFD Number 2024-01 levy a services special tax, and set a public hearing date for November 19th, 2024.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, we're going to do technical questions from the council members. I would remind the council members that our questions go to Mr. Metzler. We're going to start with Councilmember Irving.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I thought I had a handle on this, but maybe I don't. Let me just ask two really important questions. First of all, I believed that we would begin the, what's it called, the CFD with a new development.
And effectively, that is the proponent on this particular project. It's an undeveloped piece of property in the tentative mapping stage, so undeveloped.
Okay, so when this time frame or this timeline, when we send out ballots, I mean, who are we sending them to?
The actual property owners that are asking to be affected by this CFD.
Okay, the other question that I have is we're going to levy there'll be two special taxes, right?
It'd be one with two components, a component that would be allocated for the public safety component, and then the other that could be allocated for the O&M. And I hope I said that correctly.
So the two components have a 5% escalator that annually there's a 5% escalator. Is that what I understand?
So it's one CFD with, there will be two separate line items on the property tax bill, and the revenue coming in would be separated by fund number. And then the city would take that revenue and allocate it to the different services that are being provided. Each of those special taxes is proposed to have an escalator that is a minimum of 5% with a maximum of 5% or CPI
Annually?
annually.
So every year it could increase by 5% for both taxes?
Well, every year, the maximum special tax would increase by a minimum of 5%. But that's just an increase in the maximum special tax to allow the city to have necessary funding to provide the services. If service requirements of the services for those properties or public safety, if the cost doesn't escalate that much, the actual cost year over year, the city has the ability to levy something less than the special tax. But by allowing an escalator, that could be sufficient to cover something like at least the contract of public safety on an annual basis, or, whatever inflation might do in the future.
Right.
You're providing for the ability to cover your costs without necessarily needing to go up to that maximum special
So
tax.
if I can just say it differently, because I think it's important also for the public to hear, because I think people are getting fixed on that as being an automatic number. The 5% or the CPI, whichever is greater, is a ceiling.
Mhm.
You wouldn't have the authority as council on an annual basis to assess a CPI higher than that ceiling, whether it's 5% or the number that's greater than 5% if the CPI at the time is higher. That's your ceiling. You still have ultimately on an annual basis, you can approve something dramatically less, including zero if you wanted.
Okay, I understand, but help me see this through a different lens, and then I'll let it be. My concern, I remember having the conversation with you in the workshop, is that for the new homeowner, that we weren't putting an undue burden of taxation on the new homeowner. So, I understood what you just said, but based on these calculations, help me see it differently, so that, because especially when we think about public safety, the trend has been that the cost of public safety is escalated, not just for Victorville, it's across the state, across the nation. So help me understand how to see this differently, where the new homeowner isn't burdened with the additional assessment.
No, the new homeowner is going to be burdened with this assessment. This would be an assessment that would be property-based. It would be collected through the property taxes based upon the numbers that you see here and that are approved annually. It would be a burden of the homeowner, the property owner. And effectively, it's a mechanism designed really to mitigate the long-term economic and environmental impacts that are created by that resident. So that's the calls for service, that's the maintenance of the roads and so forth.
Well, let's say that in another subdivision where the escalator does not exist, they're not part of the CFD.
Yep.
You buy it, a person sells a home, and then the new homeowner purchases it. Will that new homeowner also, right?
No, this would only be for new development, or could apply to development, existing development where, say, there's an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit built that's actually, creating a new economic and environmental impact.
Mhm.
It could be in that case, but if it's sale, let's say your home from your person to another person, the simple transfer of an existing home is not going to trigger participation into the CFD. It's new development.
Well, thank you for that comment. I guess it is what it is till it ain't. I got you. Thank you.
And I have to say this, hindsight being 2020, you wish something like this was in place on day one when you decide to incorporate as a city, so that you have the mechanism in place so you can collect and keep up with the costs going forward. There is a reality that did not take place in this city. And unfortunately, because of that, you have a lot of area developed already that, yes, I think in theory it's appropriate to say where you can have disproportionate treatment of existing development for new development. But I think that, effectively what we've been looking for, especially with respect to the goals set forth by this city council, is there's a point in time where we got to stop that bleed, because the more residential development, the more new development that comes in that isn't paying its full freight in terms of the cost of service, the more the existing residents, businesses are having to subsidize those additional costs.
I appreciate your position. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Metzler, I have a few questions. First of all, and I think most of them are quick answers. So the discussions on this particular item began before the council in May. Am I correct?
Before the council is when we made the presentation in May, that's correct.
But you had discussions or meetings with stakeholders prior to that?
Correct, and perhaps Ms. Davidson, who's been the lead on my team navigating this, perhaps I can have Ms. Davidson give some background as to the initiation and the efforts at that time.
Sure, you're asking about communication with the BIA?
Or any other stakeholders, yes.
Yeah, it's mainly been with the BIA, and we did actually going all the way back to 2022 when we were, if you recall, talking about updating our DIF fees, and we introduced the resolutions to allow for participation in the Skip and Bold programs. In concept, we introduced it to the BIA at that time, but then we wanted to study it. We actually wanted to get into the details and make sure we understood what we were going to be proposing. So it took a little more time than anticipated. We did reach out to the BIA starting in April of this year, prior to the presentation with the council. And since that time, we have had several discussions, including myself and other staff, including Heidi and her staff, including the BIA's consultant. We've gone back and forth several times. I do think that we have given them a fair chance to ask questions and present different facts for us to consider. We've actually made some changes to the model as we moved along in response to those discussions. So I do think we have had sufficient conversation.
Okay, and I know that, let's just say, for argument's sake, that this moves forward tonight. During the 30-day period until the next public hearing, I understand that there can't be changes made to increase the rates, but can there be changes made to decrease the rates?
That is correct.
And Mr. Metzler, would you, in that 30-day period, would you be amenable to ongoing discussions with, say, the BIA? And now we have a letter from the High Desert Association of Realtors.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had a great working relationship with the BIA. We're actually very proud of the relationship that we've had with them, the open dialogue that we've had, certainly. I think our greatest testimony recently was getting through the DIF process and actually getting their support. So there are absolutely we would certainly welcome continuing that dialogue, because it's a complicated subject. You know, there's a black box here, if you will, with a bunch of numbers that spits out numbers and formulas that spits out a result. And it's probably helpful for everybody to do our best to understand all that goes into it. You know, I will tell you that, you know, there are assumptions in each of our black boxes where the assumptions are different, and that's very likely a big part of the difference of opinion we have. But absolutely have no problem continuing those dialogues, because at the end of the day, we're going to ultimately get past this issue and still have a dependency on working with each other to work on the next projects or issues in the future.
So on the idea of assumptions, there's clearly a disagreement on that. So I have to ask, in the presentation, it sounded like, I think I heard that the BIA was amenable to the what was the term? The $1,800 fully burdened. Is that correct?
I'll let Ms. Shippey answer that.
Yes, so we worked with the BIA and made some adjustments to our model in working with them and collaboratively, and we agree on the total expenditures that would be applied to services required by future development. So
And does that include the 500 some odd dollars for public safety?
the $1,800 is the total.
Both taxes.
No, it's the total impact of just public safety on new development The 525.35 is the proposed tax rate less an offset of revenue that the city has opted to allocate to offset that impact. So so revenue that the city could generate from this new property coming in, property tax revenue, Measure P revenue, and then code enforcement, that you get revenue from code enforcement that would offset the impact of this new development. The city has allocated a portion of that revenue to offset the impact of this new property.
So is the impact based on the purchase price of each new development or the development, sale of the property,
I'll let Ms. Sheppy.
purchase of the property?
So the impact is basically the cost of providing police services, fire services, and code compliance services on basically a per capita basis. And then we use that to determine an amount that would be allocated to each new property that comes into the city.
Is that a calculation based on the assumptions we're making or based on a fixed purchase price?
The calculation is based on actual costs of the city for providing those services.
Okay. And, okay, and then so I'm a little bit confused on, Mr. Metzler, something that you said. So ADUs can trigger new development.
We haven't been focused on that, but certainly what we're looking into is the application of an ADU or certain types of ADUs triggering that. The focus of this study has been single-family residential development, but I don't want to mislead the public if we ultimately treat ADUs as new development.
And the ADUs would only be in those newly developed zones?
No, they could be in existing areas as well.
Could be, okay. And, but this, like if someone purchases a home in a new development and then a year later sells it, that does
Your time is up.
not trigger?
That does not trigger, correct.
It's only based on the, thank you.
New
Thank you, Madam
construction.
Mayor.
Councilmember Gomez?
What is sufficiency and how many contacts ensued with the stakeholders?
Well, sufficiency, I think, is having a collection amount that is sufficient to pay for the costs. And so that would be the number that we've identified for the public safety, the $520 some for public safety, and I think it's $600 plus or minus for the O&M. That is, based in our model, that would be sufficient to help us at least keep up with the cost of service. As far as the number of times we've met, I don't know how many exactly. Ms. Davidson's led those efforts. Maybe you can estimate.
Yeah, I can estimate as far as meetings that I've participated in directly, at least 4, but there have been numerous phone calls and conversations between the consultants. I could not capture the number of interactions.
And instead of more deputies and code enforcement on the streets, has the city looked into IT consultants, maybe to address public safety mitigation measures for policing and code compliance instead of that special tax as a CFD?
I think there, so to answer the question as to technology, we are looking into technology. We've actually shared with you and the council the different types of technologies that we've deployed, that we're deploying, and that we're considering deploying. So technology is a very big part of our future outlook on public safety. As far as the funding, I think this is speaking to the point of needing sufficient funding to keep up with the cost of service. We're looking at alternative forms of technology to help supplement and enhance public safety. And in some respects, that's going to help, I shouldn't say reduce, but more efficiently use our limited resources for public safety, but still we're going to have a long-term funding mechanism in place, which is what this item is intended to bring.
And what formula did the city utilize to analyze the amounts of money to provide costs that the new development can't sustain?
That's all been explained in the previous presentation. Obviously, there's a very long drawn-out methodology, but it does start by assessing what are the costs of service, looking at what our costs of service are today, including our police, code enforcement, fire, road, landscape maintenance, things of that nature. It's taken actual costs, made forecasts, also looked at growth, growth projections, population projections, all of that factors in to figure out what is going to be the cost of service in a future year. And then also what is a necessary collection rate on a unitary basis so that we can actually generate enough money to pay for those costs when they're incurred.
And what are the advantages and disadvantages of considering the actual implementation of a CFD?
Well, the advantages, I think, we've kind of touched on. It provides you with an opportunity to satisfy one of your strategic goals, which is to move towards fiscal sustainability. The disadvantage is if you did not want to move forward, then it's likely to suggest that you're not interested or as serious about pursuing fiscal sustainability and perhaps relying on your existing population, your existing development to support and perhaps even subsidize future growth.
Will the special tax be an enterprise account, a GF, which is a general fund, or what type of account?
We would create a separate fund. I just don't know yet if it'd be a special fund or an enterprise fund. Most likely a special fund. It will be accounted for separately, though.
And how does the CFD affect non-parcels that don't have any property owner buy-in? In other words, there's a requirement for a buy-in for the property owner once the CFD is there, or currently, since it's not, does that property owner has the option of? So presently versus future CDF.
So again, it would be all new development, and it'd be a function of the development process. And in fact, how the CFD basically gets implemented is because conditions are currently being written through the planning process. We have a condition on new development being imposed and being approved by your planning commission that requires development to mitigate its long-term economic impact. That's an actual condition being written. And so the question becomes, how do they do that? This CFD is actually the answer to how to do that. This becomes the answer. This becomes the mechanism so that when new development is trying to move forward with their project, if it's a residential tract, they'll effectively, as a condition to the development, annex into the district and therefore be able to move forward not only with their development, but with the city being able to collect the requisite CFD revenues to pay for the services over the long term.
Do you know how many CFD elections are going to be affecting the boundaries within districts areas 1 through 5?
I don't know that at this time, and I don't know that we have an estimate, but what I can tell you is that there's likely going to be many over the course of the future. It starts with one, and then effectively how things work is all new development basically annex into this initially created CFD. I will tell you, it's not a lot different than what you as a council already experience when we have new development annexing into our existing LMADs, which are the landscape maintenance assessment districts. It's really the same exact concept, just for an expanded purpose.
And what percentage of the high desert cities charters general are using CFDs in the county? So here and then in the county, do we know CFD usage?
I don't know, but what I can tell you that there are a lot of cities, especially growing cities, actually looking to and implementing this tool. I'd first become aware of this tool and been very interested in this tool, I think back in 2017, 2018, when I was meeting my counterparts in the city of Corona and talking with them. It was a very important tool for them to help facilitate a lot of that growth in South Corona, chasing down south of the 91 along the 15 freeway. And they used it quite heavily in that area. And quite honestly, I think helped that area develop quite nicely in such a way where it allowed the city to expand to become bigger than it really probably needed to be. But of course, to support that, the city there took the position that it needed the money to mitigate the long-term economic impacts. So that was probably the first example that I experienced. I know we certainly shared with you in May in the presentation the number of different cities that Webb and Associates has worked with throughout Southern California, and it's not just a few; it's quite a lot that have been using this mechanism to facilitate development.
Can you expand on what are the reasons of not pushing this forth today? I mean, pushing it through today?
Well, I think the main reason for pushing it forward is because it's been requested through the property owner that we begin this process. Not moving it forward effectively could delay the ability of that property owner to ultimately record its map, which I think is its goal, so that it could ultimately either sell that map or develop upon that residential tract.
Can a 30-day delay inhibit more voices that want to contribute as some that I heard today?
I think the voices that you're going to hear are more so from the stakeholders, likely the ones that you've heard from tonight. This is not something we've done in a vacuum. We've been open about it. And then certainly the property owner, which has represented him or herself by submitting their request to initiate these efforts. 30 days, I think we can accomplish the same by adopting the resolution of intent and at least starting the clock. And then bringing to a decision at the public hearing when the actual ballots are cast and the public hearing is completed.
And the property owner we're talking about, did they know about the CFD or did you make them aware? You as the city, I mean.
They became aware likely because it was a condition of approval on their
Oh, okay.
tentative track map.
Thank you. No further questions.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
Yeah, so, the brand new home, you're subject to the CFD, but when that home is sold, then that is washed off the taxes, the escrow account or wherever it's.
No.
So-
Once the property is annexed into the district, the property would remain responsible in perpetuity. Unless, I don't know if there's suspension clauses or anything like that, or if there's a life on it, maybe we should speak to that, but it's not wiped out due to transfer and sale.
Yeah, the special tax would be assessed so long as services are being provided at the approval of city council.
Okay, and then the project, the person that wants to annex in, I think I saw you said $165 for maintenance?
No,
That's-
I'm sorry, if I said that, then that was not correct. At least the numbers that I have written down here, and Heidi can correct me if I'm wrong, but the public safety component that we've been speaking to is $525, and I believe the O&M is about $689 for a residential.
The O&M for this particular track, the calculation is 165.47.
Oh, for this particular
Yes.
track, I'm sorry. And I think there is a point to make there with respect to the O&M because there's different characteristics of different tracks. The O&M component could be different. Saying it differently, you may have some tracks that have less roads, for example, less pavement to maintain as an example, and so the O&M can vary.
Okay, so I'm looking here and it says initial special tax rate of $165.47 per residential unit. What, I'm confused, because we're talking about $689 for maintenance, $525 for public safety, and the remainder of that up to $1,800 would be picked up by our Measure P.
So
So I'm just confused at what the 165 is.
the 165, I believe, is the number that Ms. Sheppy just referred to that's specific to the calculation for this particular track. So this particular tract would be burdened by the two components, the 169, is that the number? 165, and then the 525 for the public safety. So the product of the two is what this tract would be saddled with
Correct.
in the total.
So, so individual tracks will have a different number? Or is this guy getting something special? Because
So each track,
hasn't he, I'm sorry,
sorry.
one second, I'm sorry. Hasn't he already had three tentative map extensions?
So I believe that tract has had all of their tract extensions, and if it's three, is it three? They've exhausted the tentative tract map extensions that they're allowed. I think it's three, it might be two. But the point, I think, is still the same. But that's not having to do directly with the difference in the price. You're seeing a 165 based upon the calculation of costs associated with the maintenance of that tract. So the exact amenities in this tract I can't see based upon the little map here, but it's likely it may have less LMAD, or maybe it doesn't have a DFAD, or maybe it doesn't have a SLAD. You know, there's components in there that likely are different than, say, a bigger tract.
Okay, so I need to understand this. So it maxes out at 689, but it can go as low as 165. I'm confused.
I'm not certain
Or
where the
is every
689.
individual tract going to be different as far as the maintenance?
The tracks can be different, and so the 689 was probably an example I took from a previous study, and
Okay.
so, and that might have been a completely different example. So I think specific to this particular tract, you know, I would say ignore the 689 because I was likely pulling that from the previous presentation, and not this specific presentation. The O&M for this one would be the 165.
Okay. Like my other questions, I'm just going to call it the equation, how everything's figured out. We're calculating.
Mr. Metzler, believe it or not, Bob now got me confused. Each home in the tract that we're discussing, not this one for 165, a new one. We're talking one time taxation of 525 per year with a 5% towards the 525, not the value of the house, the 525, right?
It'd be the 525 plus the 165.47 in this particular case.
So at the end of the year, at the end of 5 years, the house is gonna go up, the taxes could possibly go up to $665 with a 5% each year for 5 years.
If approved by the council.
Okay. Right now, if you buy a home in a tract, you're paying an LMAD fee, correct? Not the same one, because Brentwood was built over 20 years ago and there was no escalator put on it. So the $22 a month that you get, $22 a year you get charged on your home, not you specifically, but the people that live in Brentwood to take care of the LMAD for Brentwood, there's not even enough money to pay for the upkeep of the LMAD, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so this will be in addition to the LMAD, or no, this will take the place of the LMAD?
This will take the place of what we traditionally annex into. And so a new development without this CFD typically is required into one of the citywide LMADs.
And DFADs and MADs and all that. So what we've been paying into, each housing tract built for the last 20 years that have been built with an LMAD have already had an LMAD escalator put into it, except for LMAD 1 because of Brentwood not being built with an escalator.
LMAD 2 and 3. Yeah. So for new development, instead of sending that money to the existing citywide, we'd still be collecting, and it'd likely still be the same Nexus study in terms of calculating cost for the citywide LMAD. We'd just collect that in the new CFD and still distribute it to pay for, you know, the similarly natured LMAD costs that citywide LMAD incurs.
So if I buy a house for $300,000 when I first move in, and 5 years later, my house is now worth $600,000 because of work that I've done on it, My 525 has now only gone up to 600 because it's only 5% of the $525, correct? Not the value of the home.
Correct. Any escalations after the rate is initially established, any escalations to that are going to be subject to that ceiling inflator that we talked about, 5 or the COLA, whichever is higher. So it could be higher than 5%. I mean, but still,
What the state, yes, what the CIP of the state.
but whatever that number is, again, that's a ceiling. This council certainly can choose to approve the ceiling or something less.
Okay. Now I get to go to roads. The money collected for a housing tract that does, if the CFD passes, those roads will be guaranteed to be.
Your time is up.
Will be taken care of.
This is a funding source that supplements our ability to pay for roads that likely wouldn't otherwise get paid.
Thank you. At this time, I'll invite a motion for this item.
I'd like to make a motion, Councilwoman Blanca Gomez, to postpone this item and have it agendized for a minimum of 30 days to not exceed 90 days for contribution of stakeholder continuance of opinions.
I do not have a second for that motion. That motion dies.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adopt staff's recommendation on the agenda with the added requirement that that staff engage in ongoing committed discussions with stakeholders, including the BIA and the High Desert Association of Realtors, to see if agreement can be made or can be had on current assumptions.
Second.
I have a first by Councilmember Jones, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Harriman. Comments on the pending motion, Councilmember Jones?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Mr. Metzler, first of all, I appreciate the comments you made early on about the history of collaboration with the BIA. I think that's significant in our community, not only because we have to think about the welfare of our residents, we have to think about new construction and what that means to our residents, but we also have to provide good programming and service delivery. So I'm looking to balance all of that out. I certainly appreciate the voice of the BIA and the High Desert Association of Realtors. I think we need to, they are the experts in the area of construction and real estate, and I want to make sure that we're listening intently with a focus on doing what's good and honorable all the way around. I was happy to hear that we can, I'm presuming annually, if this all goes through and all is said and done, when there's an annual reporting of things, and then the council at its discretion can accept or modify the proposal for the particular escalator. So I think that's good because that allows flexibility in looking at what's going on in our community at the time and the health of our city for sure. So again, I put this forward with a clear understanding and trust in our staff that we're going to have. I know we've had good conversations in the past, not at complete agreement, but having healthy conversations going forward so that we can, I hope, find agreement in the best interest and so that we can make the best decisions possible for our city. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman, comments?
Yeah, I have more questions, but time's up for questions. But it looks like the projected multifamily MFR is projected at 53%. That seems awfully high to me.
Right.
I was on the planning commission, and that I didn't see all that many multifamily residence projects. We did some zoning, but we did not approve much. So I'm just not sure how that number comes about. And so hopefully when we have this meeting with the BIA, we can clarify or clean some of that up. Man, I have a hard time. I'm not a tax guy, but so after 5 years, in essence, after 20 years, if somebody lives in the house that long, only I live in my house for 35 years, but that could actually double in 20 years at 5% every, or excuse me, 5% a year. And I just, you know, I have a little bit of problem with that, but hopefully we can put together some conversation. And I think I would, and I've said this, I would like to be part of that conversation. I don't know if I'm allowed to be, but it would definitely be educational for me, and I can relate that to the community which I serve, and so I would hope that I can be included, the mayor and mayor pro tem included in this discussion. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Irving?
I have a lot of comments, but I think what's appropriate is I would hope that our staff would continue conversations with the stakeholders, regardless of whether or not we added an additional clause to the motion. I am going to say it. I guess where my concern is, you know, Victorville is known as a community that offers affordable housing. My concern is, what will the future look like? Who's going to purchase here, and what will be the burden of coming to Victorville? So I'm just thinking about the future. But I also understand that we need a funding mechanism in place to handle the rising costs of services. And definitely, you mentioned South Corona. If they've used this funding tool, it has been a lot of growth and in a positive way. So I guess I understand we have to do what we have to do. Thank you.
Councilmember Gomez, comments?
Despite moving to agendize and postpone any city council action and deliberations for item number 9 for additional modifications pending stakeholder inputs for at least 30 days from today's date and no longer than 90 days, for instance, with the BIA, the Realtors Association, among other groups, the motion was not seconded. The vote approval straddles the lines of communication, trumping any influence that our stakeholders attempted to leverage tonight, unfortunately. Actions are much louder than our words, and thus far I have not seen councils mobilize to and provide equity in issues such as these historically.
The comments I have, I'm going to piggyback on Bob's and Leslie's. 20 years ago, a yard of concrete cost us $52, okay? That same yard of concrete now costs you $125, and that's less than 20 years later. So not only have the prices have gone up for building materials and jobs, they've gone up more than 50%. And if 20 years of that amount goes up, you'll be doing good, because they'll be able to still take care of your own man. When you say the burden of moving here, I get it. Because it's cheap housing. Along with cheap housing comes the burden of living here. Living here is no different than living down the hill, folks. Let's bring up what we need to do here, the money we need to invest here, and what we need to do. And this CFD can help. We need to stop the bleed on these roadways, folks. Asphalt deteriorates in this heat, and that's nothing we can do about it. As long as we're going to put it down, we have to take care of it. And if you want to take care of it, this is what we're going to have to do. If you don't, I'll stop there. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, will you please take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez,
Nay.
Councilmember Irving,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman,
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes.
Motion passes with Councilmember Gomez voting no.
We've now taken action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item 10, La Mesa Nisqually Interchange 404, Permit Compliance Mitigation Site Coordination. Amendment number 5 to the Consult Professional Services Provided Agreement with WSP USA, Inc. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This item is brought forward effectively as a professional service provider agreement, seeking an amendment, effectively adding for additional monies necessary to try to bring us closer to satisfying all of the environmental requirements associated with the La Mesa and Nisqually interchange and the permit compliance that goes along with having constructed that bridge. So with that, the item is authored by your city engineer, Mr. Freddie Bonilla, who's unable to be here with us. So we have Harry Mayo, our senior civil engineer, available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the Honorable City Council approve Amendment 5 to the Consultant Professional Services Provider Agreement with WSP USA Inc. to increase the compensation in the amount not to exceed $32,600 for the La Mesa Nisqually Interchange Permit Compliance and Mitigation Site Coordination.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to do technical questions from the council member. Councilmember Gomez?
I presume this item is ministerial. Is that the case?
At this point, this is just administrative, just needing additional funds to try to satisfy the regulatory agency's environmental requirements.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Irving?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Jones?
So it's my understanding that this closes out the mitigation and permitting expectations.
Mr. Mayo, I know we've been at this, if you'd come up, please, we've been at this for a while with Army Corps and Fish and Wildlife and the other environmental groups. I'd like to say this closes us out, but I probably have said that on Amendment 1 or 2, and so I don't want to have to eat my words again. Where are we at in the process in terms of bringing this to closure?
We're almost there. Thank you. Let me come up here and speak. Basically, where we're at with the process of this, closing out this project is getting the final agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers. Previously to that, we had multiple regulatory agencies were involved in this process, and everybody else, as far as their conditions, have been satisfied. So what remains is satisfying the conditions from the Army Corps, and ultimately dedicating a parcel of land that can be a habitat in perpetuity forever, basically, establishing it. And WSP is the city's consultant who is working with the organization that will be managing and taking care of this permanent parcel of land that will be a habitat forever. And in order for RLC to be able to comply with what the Army Corps of Engineers wants, basically WSP tells the RLC what is required. RLC puts it in the maintenance agreement, so that way they can ensure that this piece of land is ultimately maintained forever. So there's a few things that have to be finalized in order to close the agreement with them, and between RLC, WSP, are the ones working on do this and satisfy.
I think we're close.
So we are close.
Okay, well, fingers crossed. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I have none.
And I have none. I'll invite a motion for this item. Motion to approve adopt staff's recommendation.
Second.
I have no pending comments. Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I have none.
Councilmember Jones?
None, thank you.
Member Irving?
No comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Gomez?
Not at the moment.
Madam Clerk, will you take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez?
Aye.
Councilmember Irving?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
Yes.
Mayor Becerra?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. At this time, we've taken action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item 11, purchase of a compressed natural gas station skid replacement for the McCart Road CNG station, project JM24-09. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. As you know, at 2 locations here in the city of Victorville, we own and operate compressed natural gas stations. We're in the compressed natural gas business where we actually sell to private individuals or private entities compressed natural gas to their vehicles that actually rely or depend upon that type of fuel source. And so with that, as a part of our operations and maintenance and our long-term capital planning, we identify not only maintenance but replacement needs. This item deals with the replacement need for a skid, natural gas station skid at our McCart Road facility. Of course, the other facility that we operate is at D Street over at the Transit Center. And so with that, this item deals with the purchase of that skid replacement. I can't explain in great detail what a skid is, and that's why I have Mr. Matthews here to be able to explain that better to you. He is the author on this item, and he's also available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the Honorable City Council award the purchase of a compressed natural gas station skid replacement for the McCart Road CNG Station Project JM 24-098 to Atlas Copco Compressors LLC for an amount not to exceed $259,895.10.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to do technical questions from council members. Councilmember Irving?
I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Gomez?
None at the moment.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes, I would certainly benefit from a brief description of the skid. I looked it up, just brief. I looked it up and I didn't get it completely for sure.
Yeah, the skid is really what compresses the gas coming from 20 PSI to 4,000 PSI. We get the gas from Southwest Gas. The skid is basically the compressor, the cooler, and the electric motor required to make this happen. These units have been in place for 20 years, so they're well past their useful life.
See, that was easier than what I attempted to read. Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
So it's like that motor, when I go get propane for my travel trailer, is that motor that goes on to fill the tank?
Yeah, well, if you have some of those are delivered and they already are pressurized, but others could compress the gas into the tank. I think most of them take deliveries.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Metzler, if I may ask him a question?
Please.
Mr. Matthews, how long is the McCart Station going to be down for?
We don't really know yet. We don't have the contractor in place to put this skid in. There's a lot of modifications we're going to need. So it would be a guess, but maybe a month.
The D Street Station is up and running good, correct?
Yeah, it will have to pick up the slack.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'll invite a motion for this item.
Move to adopt staff's recommendation.
Second.
First by Councilmember Jones, second by Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Harriman. Councilmember Jones, any comments?
None, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I have none.
Councilmember Irving?
No comments, thank you.
Councilmember Gomez?
No comments at the moment.
And I have none. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez?
Aye.
Councilmember Irving?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
Yes.
Mayor Becerra?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
We've now taken action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item 12, runway 1735 reconstruction, phase 5 project, CC 24-126. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This item involves you acting in the capacity as the Airport Authority Board of Directors, and as you know, in your role, leading the efforts out at the Southern California Logistics Airport. Among the many responsibilities we have out there is the operation and maintenance of an existing airfield, which includes 2 runways. Your north-south primary runway, which is 1735, is approximately 13,000 feet in length. And then you also have a crosswind runway about 10,000 feet in length. That's your secondary runway. And as this council knows, for several years now, we've focused our attention on the reconstruction of your primary runway, in large part that, and the other runway for that fact, were inherited runway systems from the military, certainly built to a much different standard that is the standard today for aircraft pavement, especially for the aircraft type that we are accustomed to accommodating out at SCLA. So this phase 5 suggests that we're pretty deep into the collective effort of reconstructing all of runway 1735, not quite yet complete even with this phase of the whole length, but this project largely is focused on reconstructing a segment that's closest to your intersection, but also including a significant amount of drainage improvement to help facilitate the movement of stormwater collection and the moving of that stormwater away from your runway system, keeping working to keep a safe runway environment. So with that, this item also depends or relies on a significant amount of grant money, largely received from the FAA, but other sources as well. The better detail of this, of course, is your airport director, who's before you at the podium, Mr. Eric Ray, certainly available for question, comment, and additional information to questions you might have.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority Board of Directors ratify the acceptance of grant agreement number 3-06-0359-033-2024 between the United States of America acting through the Federal Aviation Administration and the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority in the amount of $3,432,622 in support of the runway 1735 reconstruction phase 5 project CC 24-126 and adopt resolution number SCLAA 24-006, increasing budgeted grant revenues by $3,432,622 and increasing budgeted grant expenditures by $3,432,622 and increasing budgeted grant matching expenditures by $381,402.44 and increasing budgeted airport operations expenditures of $1,099,872.37 and approve the award of a construction contract to Pave Tech Inc. in the amount not to exceed $4,933,549.27 for runway 1735 reconstruction phase 5 project CC 24-126.
I promise
My
we
gosh,
didn't
that's
try
a
to make
mouthful.
it
Say how
complicated.
much?
I promise we didn't try to make it this complicated.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to do technical questions from Councilmember. Councilmember Jones?
Well, you didn't try, but here we are. So, Mr. Metzler, first of all, quick hats off to all of the grant monies that we've received on this important project, for sure. Can't say that I'm thrilled about the $1.1 million shortfall, but it is what it is, and this work has to be done. When do you think all of this can be said and done, completed?
Mr. Ray, I think, can best speak to the shortfall, perhaps even the ability to recover that, but then this construction schedule.
Yes. We're not happy about that shortfall either, but we do believe, we've got really good reason to believe that by the end of November, we're actually that shortfall will turn into a positive. The bilateral infrastructure bill, we believe we will have 4 years of that money coming up. I think we detail that as one. Yeah, we believe when it's all said and done, we're going to be about 71,000 in the positive as opposed to 1.1 million in the negative. So we don't have that as a guarantee, but we have that on a very good promise that it's probably going to happen. But I also like to note that even if we had to pay the 1.1, we're at about 30% match. That's not a bad deal when you can, for every 30 cents you spend, you're going to get $1. So, but we hope to do a lot better than that.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Contractor wants to move starting first week in November, and if that's the case, we may be done in as little as 70 days. Weather 65, 70 days.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Thank you, Mr. Ray.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
Can I ask him a question?
Please.
Are they gonna pulverize or remove and replace?
The asphalt sections will be pulverized. They'll be coming with a rotomill and chip it out that way. So it'll turn into the crushed miscellaneous base, which will then be used later on
Right.
as a sub base.
Is the existing concrete there a foot thick or more? Or is none of the concrete being done? It's just the asphalt?
Just the asphalt that's being
Okay, so there's no rebar in it or nothing like that. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gomez?
No questions, thank you.
Councilmember Irving?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Ray, how you doing?
I'm doing fine.
I don't know how I could ever doubt you, sir. I don't know how I could ever doubt you. I owe you an apology. I asserted that you had not included the DBE goal, participation goal, in this write-up. I am so very wrong. So I want to say I'm sorry about that, but I do have one question. Does Padilla and Associates continue to do the compliance for the airport?
Yes, ma'am. They do.
Okay,
And they help us set the goal as well.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's see, Pave Tech, they were able to achieve at least 11.5%.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much.
you.
Sorry I doubted you.
That's okay.
Praise for you and staff. If we could get that much grant money for our roads everywhere else, we'd be in good condition. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll invite a motion for this item.
I move to adopt as written.
I'll second. Mayor Prochem Harriman, any comments?
I have, Eric is on top of it always.
Councilmember Gomez?
No comments at the time.
Councilmember Irving?
I just want to say I'm sorry I doubted you, Mr. Ray. Thank you.
Councilmember Jones?
Well, thank you to everyone, Mr. Metzler, to your team for all of the hard work and bringing us this far. I would be glad to see this done in a few months plus. Pray for good weather. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Ditto with everybody else. Thank you. We like the rest of you too, Doug. You just. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez,
Aye.
Councilmember Irving,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Protem Harriman,
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you. We've now taken action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item 13, purchase of an airport sweeper. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. That runway system that we spoke of on a daily basis goes through a routine amount of inspection, but also a routine amount of maintenance. And in this particular case, sweeping to help keep the runway system free from foreign object debris, or FOD for short. And so we traditionally, as a part of our daily routine, rely on a sweeper and a sweeper operator to actually conduct daily sweepings of the runway system. We're dealing currently with a piece of equipment that's old and aging and requiring a tremendous amount of maintenance to the point where it's reaching the end of its useful life, necessitating the purchase of a replacement a model. And so with that, this item is dealing with the purchase of a Timco Model 600 regenerative air sweeper that would be funded from airport funds and dedicated to support the operations out at the airport. This item's also been authored by your airport director, Mr. Eric Gray, and he's certainly available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Would you please read the recommendation?
That the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority Board of Directors approve the purchase of a Temco Model 600 regenerative air sweeper in the amount of $400,357.69.
Thank you. Technical questions from council member at this time. Councilmember Gomez?
Yes, do we know what the expected life of the new airport sweeper would
Mr.
have?
Gray can answer that question.
Thank you. It's typically 20 years.
And then final question, is the airport sweeper akin to a street sweeper?
It's a little different. This is a regenerative unit. The ones that you see on the street typically have a big drum broom in the back. These do not have that. They don't have the drum broom. We don't like drum brooms because drum brooms are metal bristles and that can cause the foreign object debris. It can leave the things that we're trying to remove. So basically, a regenerative unit is more like a vacuum. It sucks as opposed to brushing with a smaller suction head. It has a bigger suction head, but less, but no bristles.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Ervin?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones?
No questions.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
The one we have is just be a backup.
We'll place this one as our primary, and we have one that's a 2012 model. We'd like to use that as the backup then. This, the one that we're replacing, the 01 model is, or 3 model, that one is on limited hours anyhow, so it's got the old engine. So that would go out to the pastor.
Thank you.
Well, as many times you said old in that sentence, I happen to remember that piece of equipment. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'll invite a motion for this item.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move that the SCLAA Board of Directors adopt staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda.
Second.
First by Councilmember Jones, second by Mayor Pro Tem Harriman. Councilmember Jones, any comments on the pending motion?
I have none, thank you.
Councilmember Harriman?
None.
Councilmember Gomez?
Not at the moment.
Councilmember Ervin?
No comments, thank you.
And I have none. Madam Clerk, will you please take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez?
Aye.
Councilmember Ervin?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
Yes.
Mayor Becerra?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We've now taken action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item 14, roof restoration contract award for water department facilities. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. All of the city facilities as a part of our ongoing routine maintenance. We also undertake inspection of the conditions of the facilities. And so in this particular case, we're dealing with facilities that are specific to the Victorville Water District owned and used in the performance of water services for the ratepayers of Victorville. And so we've identified a number of facilities, building facilities that effectively need roof work, roof replacement work. And so with the number of facilities that we've identified with similarly natured needs, we've gone through the competitive process to solicit for a roofing contractor to actually undertake the fixes necessary to upgrade those facilities. So with that, this item is authored by your Director of Public Works and Water, Mr. Doug Matthews, who's here and available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the Honorable Board of Directors award a contract to Right Way Roofing in the amount of $469,000 for the roof replacement for various projects, project number CC 25-014.
Thank you. This time we'll do technical questions from council members. Councilmember Ervin?
I don't have any, thank you.
Councilmember Jones?
None, thank you.
Councilmember Gomez?
Are the facilities as reported on this item similar in material for the account descriptions as presented in the report?
I'm sorry, can you restate that question, please?
Yes, the facilities, we have 5 of them. Are the materials similar in nature or they vary based on the structure that's going to have this placed on it?
They're all spec'd. Perhaps Mr. Matthews or even Mr. Gleason, who has likely been involved in the actual scoping. Whomever wants to take the chance to answer the question, certainly you can speak to the scope as to whether or not there's similar materials amongst the buildings.
Good evening. They are exactly the same, all 5 buildings.
So exactly the same material, just varying in pricing?
Varying in pricing because of the square footage of each building.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
Hey, Mr. Gleason, can I ask you a question? You never come up here, so it's.
How often does he wear a tie, too?
Yeah. Maybe a little off topic, but I noticed the fencing on some of our well facilities are getting really bad. Okay, that's what. Okay, I have that.
Okay, you can ask me that question.
All right.
When I have none, I'll invite a motion for this item.
I move to adopt staff's recommendation
I'll
Second.
by the Board of Directors.
First by Councilmember Jones, second by Mayor Pro Tem Harriman. Councilmember Jones, any comments?
None, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I have none.
Councilmember Ervin?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Councilmember Gomez?
Not at the moment.
And I have done. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote, please?
Councilmember Gomez.
Aye.
Councilmember Irving.
Yes.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman.
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We've now taken action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item 15, Mr. Metzler, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Bear with me. This- Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. A few items to report, certainly on the Public Works side of the house on the environmental programs. City and Burtech are hosting the last Shred Fest event of the year on Saturday, November 2nd from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. That'll be taking place at the Victor Valley MRF, or the Material Recovery Facility. That's a free event open to all Victor Valley residents. For more information, we certainly have that on our website. Animal care and control operation, as you know, are doing amazing work. Certainly had huge success in adopting out animals at the recent Fall Festival. Our next event will be at the High Desert Farmers Market at VVC this Thursday, October 17th, between 8 a.m. and 12 p.m. I've got a number of pets. They're all beautiful, looking for a forever home. AC will also be, our animal control will also be hosting a low-cost shot clinic and adoption event this Saturday, October 19th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. here at City Hall. All information is on our website. And then as we do annually, our Hollow Boo drive-through event is next Friday, October 25th. That'll be here at City Hall from hours 6 to 8. If you want a really good laugh, certainly stop by. You certainly laugh. I will enjoy being laughed at if you attend, as you'll have a good laugh at the role that I get to play at that event. Economic development, we're really pleased and excited to have launched a new Shop Local social media campaign inviting residents to participate in weekly challenges by nominating their favorite business in various categories. This week, residents can nominate their favorite sushi restaurant for a bracket-style competition where we'll crown the city's top spot for sushi. So have a little fun, support your local business. With that, I'll also separately send out the development report, which better details the actual development activity in the queue, in the process here with the city. That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Item 16, discussion and possible action regarding upcoming agenda items. Councilmember Gomez,
No items.
Councilmember Irving,
Nothing, thank you.
Councilmember Jones,
I have none.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman,
I have none.
and I have done. Item 17, reports from council members to do with items from council members on staff with City of Victorville. Meetings. Thank you. Councilmember Jones?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm going to defer my report until the next meeting, including my participation in the city-funded Transform Growth Conference.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I have none.
Councilmember Gomez?
I'm not seated in any committee.
Councilmember Irving?
Nothing to report.
I have nothing. At this time, 8:19, meeting adjourned.
Yeah, could have been later. What's your plan tomorrow?